So Linda, welcome to our very third, and I say very third because this is new beginnings and it's great. Thanks to all our listeners out there, everybody, because you guys are actually listening to the podcast, which is great. So welcome. Thank you for the support. And while I do that, I also wanted to welcome Linda, CEO and founder of Pharmacy Profit Secrets. Hi, Linda.
Hey, Alex. Great to be here.
Awesome. Good to have you. Good to have you. Okay, so listen, let's get straight into it because I know that the guys are serious. They're busy. So how multi-millionaire pharmacists manage their time. Bit of a tricky title because so many of these guys are multi-millionaires, but a lot of them are on their way or hoping to be on their way, which is absolutely awesome. So a little bit of an intro before we get stuck into it. We've actually done some research and discussions, asked a lot of questions, run some surveys in relation to this particular question. They haven't been magnificent research papers and white papers and that kind of thing. So before any of you ask for that particular data, we don't have it, but we have had a lot of discussions with a lot of pharmacists who are successful, who we classify as multi-millionaires. Now, they weren't inherited millionaires. These are people who studied, they worked hard, they began with one pharmacy, maybe in a partnership, they then carried on. Now, some of these people have one extremely successful pharmacy that they're the owner or co-owner of, and a lot of the other ladies and gents have gone on to have multiple partnerships and bought and sold multiple pharmacies over the year. So what we're going to be talking about here are what are some of the challenges that people face in today's market in relation to our industry? But what are some of the things that you can do to ensure that your pharmacy is improving? Your pharmacy is either staying ahead of the competition or cutting edge in terms of the way it does business. As we always say here at PPS, make your pharmacy extraordinary. And it's one of the most important things that we aim to do. And the reality is that there's so many pharmacies out there today that are struggling. We have conversations with pharmacists every single day. We talk to the business owners. Sometimes we talk to the managers and the teams. And we understand that there are probably more challenges out there than ever before. So I guess it's a great place to start, Linda. Why are pharmacists all over the world experiencing unprecedented, I'll put my teeth back in there and I'll start that conversation again. Okay. So why are pharmacists all over the world experiencing unprecedented conditions in the market? I mean, what are the dangers to the owners and operators today?
Great question, Alex. There's so much that's changed in recent years in pharmacy. Everything from customers becoming a lot more sophisticated and a lot more choosy. Geographical boundaries don't exist in a lot of cases now with, the use of online buying and selling. So that's made a huge difference in the sense that customers are a lot more savvy about pricing and how much they're paying for particular products and services. And they can do their research very simply on the internet. Not only that, but there's a lot that they can actually choose to buy. So now more than ever, differentiating oneself as a pharmacy or as a pharmacy group is absolutely critical. And back in the day, you'd open the doors and you'd have a flood of people coming in. And there was more of that sense of community as well, where people would automatically, take their business to their local pharmacist because that's whom, they got to know. And as time has gone on and we've become more fragmented as a society, it's affected community pharmacy in a business sense as well. They're just a couple of reasons that spring to mind just off the top of my head. What do you think? What have you been observing as some real differences?
Yeah, look, I couldn't agree with you more. The whole, I've had even people say using the word the vibe has changed these days. But yeah, we talk about the market and the fact that the market has shifted in relation to all the things you've talked about. But what I've been hearing a lot about in the discussions lately is obviously growing competition, more and more of the larger corporations and banner groups are buying out groups, promising them the world in terms of how they're going to market for them, and they're going to, buy things better for them and run all that sort of stuff. And in some cases, people are happy, but you wouldn't believe me if I told you how unhappy a lot of people are out there in terms of the decisions that they've made. That's not necessarily the answer. So on top of that, you've got also the major companies, the big retailers, who've also decided, that looks like a nice piece of the pie. And they've come in and set up retail sections in relation to pharmacy. And of course, with their huge buying power, and they're already very set and grounded and established consumer markets, people are tending to sort of do their shopping there, as well as buying all the other things that they used to buy, where they could only get that kind of stuff in the pharmacy before. And then more and more operators are realizing that their market's changing because their populace is changing. So, for example, you might have had a lot of old geriatric type people or elderly people in your neighborhood, and that's shifting. And all of a sudden, it's a lot of young couples, coming in because the area is becoming more dynamic or more affordable. So, those are the active changes that are taking place that I saw, as well as, and this also needs to be mentioned, geolocations are changing. So more and more, shopping centers or malls are coming up, and those beautiful shops that we had on our local streets, where you could go and get your, talking about the baker, the pharmacist, the corner shop, the what am I trying to say? The coffee shop and that kind of stuff. It's changing, it's switching. So if we're not aware of these particular things, and if we aren't making strategically intelligent changes without acknowledging what works in today's markets, this is why so many of the pharmacists that we talk to, and you know this better than I do, are coming to us and saying, things used to be great, but I'm losing revenue. I'm going backwards. I'm going backwards in profitability. I'm having challenges and difficulties that I haven't had in a long time, and I want to make certain changes. And so, we could go on about this all day, you and I, because we talk about it, in great detail all the time. But these are some of the reasons, from my perspective, why I think that owning pharmacies and trying to run and drive pharmacies these days is becoming more and more challenging. And you've got to be savvy in business now, in sales, in marketing, and in understanding your financials and your numbers. It's not good enough anymore in just trusting in the people around you and the systems that you've purchased, and then being able to sort of sit behind the dispensing counter and dispense. The game has changed. Everything has shifted.
Absolutely agree, Alex. Some really highly relevant points there. And I think, particularly that sense of we're no longer living in villages or with a village mentality, and the sophistication of the marketing propositions that are put forward by the bigger groups are both compelling to customers who, often for want of a better proposition, are drawn to the cheaper prices. So that becomes a real issue. The other aspect of it is that really for individual pharmacies, they need to be able to differentiate themselves. So you've got, on one hand, big groups that are putting forward these compelling propositions, and you've got banner groups who have to be sufficiently generic that they appeal to as wide a variety as possible, and might not be really honing in on individual pharmacies and their community around them and what they are interested in.
The word that we use is opportunity. There's opportunity all around them, and they're missing it, aren't they? And that's the big one. And by the way, before our listeners freak out, because I can just imagine right now everyone's thinking this and they're screaming out and they're saying, Linda, Alex, you've forgotten. What about compliance and regulation, and how difficult and limiting and challenging that has actually become in the last few years alone? And this isn't just in Australia and New Zealand and the United Kingdom. We're seeing so much of it in the States and in Canada. It's absolutely astounding.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And, more than ever, what's happening is compliance expectations and demands are going up, and compensation for meeting those compliance requirements are actually reducing. So it's a tough old world out in pharmacy now, but there are many successful pharmacists who are making this market and future markets work for them by making sure that they're ahead of the game.
Well, this brings us to the segue in terms of, I mean, I guess it's important that we establish a connection and an understanding from our perspective of the challenges out there, because as you wrote in your article a while back, you know, that we're in an unprecedented condition or situation at the moment. Now, taking into consideration, there are a lot of pharmacies and pharmacists out there today that are still very successful who have somehow been able to avoid those scenarios. So it's kind of like, we don't know what we don't know, but we're kind of still okay. There are those who are illuminating and becoming awakened to the sense of, I don't know what I don't know, and it's now actually costing me money and time and energy and my health and all those other components. So that then leads us to the particular component of, you know, is there still money to be made in pharmacy? Is this still a good investment?
Alex, unquestionably, there absolutely is. Discounting isn't going to pull a pharmacy out of the doldrums, and it's not going to pull community pharmacy out of the doldrums. But there are many pharmacy owners who are getting really clever about where they invest their time. And they're focusing on making changes now that is actually going to soften the effect of future issues. You know, as there becomes less and less support from the government, whether you're in Australia, whether you're in the US, the UK, all of these places are experiencing this same element. And there are different things that each of those pharmacy owners are focusing on when they understand their ideal perfect customer and building a value proposition around that.
Okay, so you got experience in, I mean, not only turning around some pretty poor performing pharmacies who are in dire straits and in big trouble, but also taking on clients and pharmacy owners and companies that are doing well, but they just have this insatiable need for growth and wanting to always make sure that they have the best available for their team and their staff and for themselves. You know, some people have just got those internal drivers. So talk to us a little bit about marketing. You mentioned there, you know, I think you mentioned about value proposition, you know, so tell us about marketing. Are most pharmacies at the moment, are most of the pharmacies marketing right?
Alex, I'd love to be able to say yes, but the answer is categorically no. As an entire sector, yes, there are people within that and pharmacy owners within that who have been very clever about understanding and getting to understand what their particular market wants and needs and becoming the trusted advisor, particularly to a specific niche within their community. You know, whether that is what we refer to as an avatar customer or an ideal perfect customer, or solving a specific problem, which is typical within the community of customers that you have. They become, in terms of their marketing, they do their research, they get their staff involved. This is not, you know, nobody needs to be Robinson Crusoe here. There really is opportunities, and I would strongly advise pharmacy owners to involve their staff in the marketing and in the research, because then they have buy-in to the solutions. And that makes, you know, you're talking about one person who's committed to the pharmacy compared to a whole team of people who really care about the customers and are committed to the pharmacy because they understand that the pharmacy is the conduit to helping customers, and, you know, different product ranges that they can offer to customers and market to customers whether it's within the pharmacy or external to the pharmacy, which is going to specifically focus on the needs and wants of those ideal perfect customers. You know, being able to do that typically means that you're operating and you're finding things from front of shop rather than being strongly reliant on prescriptions and filling scripts. It's not the way to make a highly successful pharmacy these days. Back in the day, and you know, we were talking about the differences. Back in the day, people would come in and script after script after script after script, but you know, these days there's a lot more pharmacies in particular areas. So it's hard to rely on script revenue alone, and front of shop is where the profit is. So, you know, being that trusted advisor and being able to market to a particular group of people within your demographic, and finding the right kind of front of shop products, professional services often come into play here. You know, even working out whether your community of customers are interested in generics and the benefits to having a script filled with generic medications, or you know, medications from the front of shop that are generic. Those are some things that really are getting focused on by very forward-thinking multimillionaire pharmacists today.
What about staff management and leading teams? Is that a key component?
Yes. One of the pieces of advice that we at PPS always give to our clients, and when we're working with pharmacy owners in particular, is they should only be doing the things that nobody else in their pharmacy can do. And that typically comes down to marketing and staff leadership. So management is something that I think many, particularly pharmacy owners who are active within their pharmacy, working within their pharmacy, are comfortable with the management of processes. It's the staff leadership that makes the difference. You know, we talk about the Pareto principle, you know, 80% of your time spent on 20% of your actions, which is actually going to create your profits. And what these guys do is they maximize their time, their efforts, and their profits by spending 80% of their time on the 20% of actions that they can do within their pharmacy. And those actions, those 20%, come down to marketing and staff leadership. So, you know, ultimately, and we touched on it earlier, leadership is so key, because that's about getting your staff involved and committed to your pharmacy, and as well as to the customers, at a point where if you're not focusing on your leadership, then you could be bringing people in through your marketing, and your staff are kind of happy to have a conversation or have a discussion with a customer, but not really probe, not ask the right questions, not find out whether, you know, what the actual need is, and then be motivated to provide a solution to that need.
We'll talk about that in a lot more detail in our next podcast, which is you know, talking about the S word. So anyone interested in that, please make sure that you get to podcast 4. But we still have quite a few things to discuss here, and we certainly don't want you to switch off at this particular point. There's a couple of things I just wanted to add to that, if I may. The discounting road is the pathway to bankruptcy. Let's just be clear on that so that everybody understands our position in relation to that. It is the road to, or it's the race to the bottom. We saw this happen in the United Kingdom. Every single awesome pharmacy in its community got obliterated by the big boys. And the same exact system is happening in the current markets that we're in. Australia, New Zealand, US, and Canada, the people that we're talking to. We can clearly see that this is where it's headed unless major action is taking place. Okay, so that's very important that everyone understands that. Marketing is poor across the board. I mean, I can't tell you in the last 2 weeks that I've looked at stats and figures and numbers, and I'm going to share this with our audience, with you, where we've seen pharmacists who've actually gone and taken their hard-earned money, and it's not cheap, by the way, and given it to companies that are predominantly specialized in marketing to actually bring forward more customers through the door. And they actually don't understand what's been given to them because the spreadsheets and the paperwork and the graphics all are too difficult for them to understand, but yet they keep paying. And I mean, this is something that we've discovered in recent months, you and I, which has astounded us, to say the least. How on earth you pay people to bring people to your pharmacy and you don't understand what they're doing and you don't analyze the numbers and ask the questions is beyond me. And the second thing that we've seen is that it's all fundamentally generic, which talks away from what you're talking about, looking at your community, your market, your services, and being able to create services in and around your pharmacy that reaches out to the community, solves the problems to the community, brings forward solutions, and then integrates itself as the trusted advisor. And yet everyone thinks, well, I've tried this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this. And yet we see in some cases, in certain pharmacies, the script numbers are going up, but the profitability is coming down. In others, we see the script numbers going down, 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 and down, and the revenue is going down. So there's all these different sort of numbers and KPIs and financials that are actually showing you that there is something wrong inside the body, but people are looking at trying to, put a Band-Aid over the problem instead of looking at the symptoms and the cause and dealing with them head on.
I think also, Alex, marketing done right actually obviously is going to increase your revenue, and specifically your front of shop revenue. It may make very little difference to your script revenue, but that's okay. We don't need to be everything to everybody. And that's what the multimillionaire pharmacists realize. It's about it's about maximizing the benefit and the value that you provide to the customers that you have and the patients, and bringing in new customers who are going to benefit similarly as the ones you've got there, and turning all of those people into loyal advocates who visit more. And when they come, you get a greater share of wallet. So, ultimately what you're doing is you're actually showing incredible integrity and fantastic service by focusing accurately on what your market needs through your marketing and your sales.
Couldn't agree with you more. And then look at the results that we've had over time in being able to get those returns for people is just proof in the pudding of that. And anyone ever interested in having a look at that can go to the Pharmacy Profit Secrets website and look at the testimonials, and you'll see people just like yourselves in terms of how they've done certain things. But quick plug-in, obviously, for people, but I mean it. I think it's important that people understand that there is absolutely a lot more than hope. There are real tactics and strategies that are being implemented today, which can make a huge difference, as you're saying, Linda, in not only increasing revenue, but profitability and making the team feel more engaged and better. And of course, having a connection to the community that's absolutely brilliant.
Also,
and I think,
sorry, if I could just interject for a minute, Alex.
Sure.
I guess also what it's about is these highly successful pharmacists have got a different mindset. They're open-minded. They adapt quickly to market conditions. They don't sit on their hands waiting for things to change. They actually are proactive.
Which is difficult for our guys, right, and girls, because what we've also noticed in the time that we've been doing this, and you've been mentoring and working with pharmacies and banner groups and the big corporates for quite a while now. So I won't say how many years exactly. I'm a polite guy, I've been well trained. So I'm not going to say anything. But the realities are that we know that our guys are conservative. That's their nature. They're not going to be the gung-ho going out there and trying to be the pioneer, or the innovators in the field. Sure, certainly there are those, and kudos to them, and we reward them and we recognize them for that. But there's so many of the guys who are so conservative, and sometimes, and I know you've talked about this, that conservative reaction can be in business an extremely bad thing. Can you talk to us a little bit about that and sort of amplify in relation to the mindset stuff that you were talking about before? Because that's such a key integral component to having a successful business. You cannot talk about one without the other.
You're absolutely right, Alex. And I guess the way that pharmacists, and yes, you're right, by their nature, most, and I'm casting a generalisation, but for the most part, pharmacists are very, are conservative, careful people. They need to be to do what they do.
Sure.
It's a very serious profession, and it should be taken seriously, and it should be respected. And the marketing and the sales, being proactive in those sorts of things. The reason why these guys are so successful is because they have that element of conservatism, which means they always are respectful of their customers. They have a top of mind awareness of what their customer wants and needs, and a genuine desire to meet those needs for the customers. That caring element is very, a very strong focus within community pharmacy and with community pharmacists. Always has been, always will be. Even with discounters, drugstores, that sort of model. Your local pharmacist or even a pharmacist within a banner group who is doing well is respectful of all of that. Equally respectful of the need to be successful in business in order to continue to serve their customers in the way that's needed. And again, that caution comes into play with the fact that the really successful ones, test and measure what they do. They test and measure everything. And marketing is included in that. So, you don't have KPIs just for your business performance. You have them for your marketing. You do you check your return on investment. You make sure that the type of marketing activities you do are measurable.
So a lot of the stuff that we're talking about right now, I'm sure sounds like modern day Aramaic to most pharmacy business owners, right? Am I taking a punch here and saying something really cheeky, or are they actively looking at key performance indicators all the time, checking their financials all the time, making sure that there are strategic plans set aside for every single team member and the whole team and the pharmacy as a whole, and actively managing their marketing campaigns, reiterating and analyzing their campaigns, and then adjusting for the actual anomalies or the successes of that, and focused on the fact that they will sell. And of course, that's a horrific word in terms of some of the instances that we've had, in talking with pharmacists, and that's in podcast 4. We're going to talk about the S word. We're not going to leave it alone. We're going to touch on that in a big way. But am I right or am I wrong? Tell me. Are they aware of all these components of their business at the moment?
The multimillionaire pharmacists are.
Right.
It's as simple as that. It's the highly successful ones who are aware of all of those aspects that you've just highlighted. And they are critical for success in today's community pharmacy sector.
So to the ladies and gentlemen out there at the moment who are going, well, I'd like to have that. You talked about Pareto before. You talked about leadership before. You and I have discovered over the years of mentoring and coaching and consulting that a lot of the times the problem is the actual owners and directors of the company, because they can't get out of their own way. They can't let go. It's been theirs for a long time, and then they just got so busy, they got wrapped up in it, and now all of a sudden all these changes are happening and they're procrastinating and they're overwhelmed, or they're actually in denial, in terms of what's happening, and their teams are out there, their pharmacy assistants, the other pharmacists and the managers and supervisors in the pharmacy are saying, you need to change, and they're going, well, I have to, I know, but I know everything, the whole I know sort of thing. And they're not finding the right ways. But you talked about leadership. You talked about Pareto, so tell us a little bit more about how can you actually fix this? If you don't have a great team dynamic right now, if your competitors are smashing you, if you've got a great big discounter around the corner that's opened up and is, just kicking your butt, if you've got, revenue issues at the moment, cash flow issues, you don't really understand your numbers, you you don't know where to begin. You're thinking, okay, I get it, guys. You're telling us that we need to make some adjustments. In some cases, we need to change. First of all, we got to be open-minded. Okay, we get it. But what do we do? How can we do it?
I think the first thing is recognizing that there needs to be change. Ideally, it's hard to do that on your own. You need some kind of mentor, whether you pay for mentoring or whether you have somebody in the industry who's a few steps ahead of you, who you can go to for advice.
Just make sure they're successful, as we say. Otherwise,
absolutely, and that it's not smoke and mirrors. So,
yeah, I
guess in terms of thinking about what your average week should look like. As a successful pharmacy owner, 40% of your time on marketing and sales related,
wow.
40% on staff leadership, because your team is your conduit to profit. And if you can create a really buzzing, sort of happy work environment, because the team are motivated, it becomes, in a positive way, a self-fulfilling prophecy. You have motivated staff who love to come to work. The place has a great atmosphere, which brings customers in. Customers love to be in a place where they walk in and they feel like they're always greeted with someone who's cheerful and who cares and is motivated to help them. And that enthusiasm and that care to provide, help and service adds to the staff members' self-respect and sense of purpose as well. So it's really important to get people involved, to encourage them, to keep talking to them and ask for their ideas, and even draw those ideas out of them. Let them know that they're valued. If employees are actually seen as individuals, they not only feel seen, which we all need as human beings, and I guess that's where I'm putting my psychologist hat on, but it also makes them accountable because they know they're being seen. And people actually, and it's counterintuitive, but research has shown again and again and again that people perform better and have greater job satisfaction when they are accountable for some results.
Couldn't agree with you more. And every time we do a study or every time we talk to the teams, they're crying out for more responsibility. They're crying out to belong more, to do more, and they're being kept away from it, or the pharmacists and the owners just keep dishing out the same old trainings, and people are bored. People don't leave jobs anymore because they're not getting paid enough. People are leaving jobs today because of their bosses, and they're leaving because they're not being challenged. So that's something to take into consideration as well. That's so important that the team is happy, because you connected that with profitability, and nothing could be actually truer. Talk about admin and other activities. So you mentioned 40% of marketing and sales. You talked about 40% on staff management, motivation, mentoring. And if you're a great mentor in your own business and you've been successful for many years, you need to make yourself the coach of the team. You've got to make sure that you make the time available to do that, so you can grow the businesses and set up the right protocols and standard operating procedures to do this, and then find ways to delegate and manage those protocols for success. So, that's pardon me, that's very important. But what's the other 20%?
The other 20% is the admin that you just can't get out of. Realistically, you should be delegating the hell out of that 20%.
Right.
The less you have to do, and if that means that you've got more time to be on the golf course or to plan your next holiday, be with your kids, whatever it happens to be, the admin, there's some you'll never escape as the pharmacy owner, and nor should you. You do need to be examining your KPIs, your numbers, making sure that you can see what's going on in your business. But, you've got to be really, self-critical and look at where your time is going.
And you're so right. So many of the pharmacy owners that we talk to say, I want more time. I'd love to spend more time on the golf course or with the family or, looking after my hobbies and that kind of stuff. And they just don't, because they are the business. They are the business. Then the reality is, if you're the business, you can't sell the business, because you and I know the only thing that makes a company valuable or a business valuable is systems and good people. So if someone goes in to buy into your pharmacy and you don't have the systems in place, and what I mean by systems in place, I'm not talking about software. I'm talking about protocols and standard operating procedures that anyone can follow, where they see weekly meetings, daily meetings, if you're having those, how you do this particular thing, how this particular thing is done. They don't just want to look at your P&L. And in most cases, that's extremely frightening, because the numbers aren't that great when you look at the numbers compared to 10 years ago. So that's frightening. So your financials have to be intact. You have to have systems for your financials. You have to show plans and strategies of how you will either maintain and protect or try to grow and protect your business. But if you're the business, and in a lot of cases, if you take the key pharmacist out of the business, there is no business. So why would somebody come in and pay you to do it? Unless you were stuck in there for 3 years trying to show them how to do it. And we've seen so many pharmacies and partnerships end up in trouble because of that very same thing, so that is absolutely essential. And, the biggest cry out that I hear a lot of times is, Alex, I just don't have the time. But as we always say, you and I, if you don't invest the time, you'll never have the time. But the fundamental for me, and what I've learned in discussing this with you this morning on this podcast, that I'm going to take away from this, and I'd love to hear what everyone else's takeaway is. So please ensure, if you haven't subscribed already to our YouTube channel, subscribe so that you don't miss out on these meetings and these YouTube sessions and podcasts that you always, whenever you can, in the comfort of your own home, or if you're taking a break at work, or if you want to do some, 15, 25-minute, 30-minute learning, go ahead and watch this stuff. But share it as well. We encourage you to share it, because we're doing this to help promote and expand and enlighten and share stuff with our industry. So share us around, everyone. That's a great way for you to get some awesome karmic points. If you feel that what we've talked about today made sense, and if you've got any comments to give us, any feedback, we welcome that too. I take it very well. Linda doesn't. I'm only kidding. She takes it a lot better. She takes it a lot better than I do. But we love to hear from you. But for me, everyone, my takeaway today, Linda, and I want to go to your thoughts in terms of to finish this up in just a couple of moments. But for me, it was, it seems like there's so few pharmacies out there. And I'm not just talking about the one-man band community pharmacy. I'm talking about the 5, 6, 10, 15, even up to the 90. I mean, we're speaking to someone who, has 90 pharmacies, and they're not working to a plan. They don't even have a strategy in place. It's just like business, the way we've always done it, and hope. And you and I know that hope is a wonderful thing. But in business, you don't want hope. You want a plan. You want to map it out. And we know that the plans don't necessarily always work out. But you can then reiterate, you can analyze, you can check what's working and keep working on that and making that better. You can see what's not working and you can change it. So what we always say is, you can't course correct a stationary vehicle. And so many vehicles that you and I are seeing today, Linda, are stationary.
I think, Alex, when we talk, you're absolutely right. And when we talk about the admin that people need to be doing, part of that is strategic planning, unquestionably. And that's not a full-time job. It shouldn't take you more than 10 or 20% of your time.
Well, I know that a lot of our listeners, I know that a lot of our listeners would be thinking, gosh, it sounds like so much work has to be done to change the game, or to get ahead of the game, or to get back to a position of strength if we're not in one right now, or whatever position people are in right now. But yeah, sure, it does take a hell of a lot of work. We're not going to tell you it doesn't. You need to roll up your sleeves and you need to really give it a red hot go. But if you do that over a good focused with plan and strategy 12 to 18 month period, you won't recognize your business, you won't recognize your team, you won't recognize yourself. And once those systems are in place, you actually have more time available to yourself than you've ever had before in a much more successful environment. But, isn't working hard and smart a much better option than spending the next 2 years, 3 years, 5 years doing the very same thing and watching everything get harder and harder and shrinking around you?
Alex, I couldn't agree more. And it is about investing time in the right areas. And in the beginning, it takes, you talk about course correcting a stationary vehicle being impossible. Well, when we first start to move the vehicle, it takes a while to get the momentum.
Totally.
You've got to push and push and push, but you've got to do the strategic planning. You've got to focus on your marketing. You need to focus on your staff leadership, as these things are all the critical touch points that you're going to focus on as a successful pharmacy continuously over the course of your pharmacy's life. And that's the way it is, and it has to be, and will continue to be for the, more than foreseeable future, because that's the world we're living in now, and being aware of what's going on around us.
Well, Linda, I want to thank you, and I want to thank our listeners for listening and for being here, and always your insights and your years of experience in having seen all these particular challenges is amazing. And we have a gift, as always, for everyone for listening to this session. It's a magnificent checklist. It's been very well thought out. To give you ideas to go through and have a look at the things that might be missing out in your pharmacy business, and the things that you're actually doing well. That's also good to know, because if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So this is one of the most downloaded things that we've had since we brought it out, and we've got it here for you. So make sure that you click on the link to get your pharmacy breakthrough checklist. This is the only checklist that covers every performance factor that Linda and I have talked about this morning and more. You're going to find out how to compete with the big discounters and stay ahead of your local competition. And it's a 10-point checklist. We know you guys are busy. We're not going to give you a thesis or anything like that. We work with very simple yet highly effective strategies and structures here at PPS. You can identify exactly how to increase your overall profitability, how to position, as Linda was talking about, your pharmacy as a community leader. Hey, there's an idea. And enhance the morale of the staff and the team, because they're a direct conduit to your profitability, as Linda said. So that's just absolutely awesome. You've got it. Just download it, enjoy it. It's a gift from the team here at PPS. And again, I just wanted to thank you, Linda, for being here with us. And any last parting comments?
Alex, thank you for the insights that you provided also. Your broad experience of business and what's happening in the world in business is really critical, and it's vital information that you've brought to our listeners today. And I thank you. I thank you for me and for, on their behalf, because it's really, what you bring to this also is that broader perspective as a consumer and a marketer, and someone who is well focused on what's happening in sales and how that works in pharmacy today, as tomorrow.
I appreciate the kind words, and I did put myself out on a limb today, but I'm happy to do it. Often I've sat in industries and looked at a freight train literally headed towards that particular industry or that particular business. And I have warned people, and I believe that being direct and straightforward is the only way to be. And what I've seen in our industry in these very tough times over the past decade is some incredibly lovely, smart, intelligent people lose everything that they worked for, or just watched it waste away. And in some countries, the effects have been devastating. And so it's easy for me to sit here and say, hey, it's okay, let's just see what's going to happen. But I'm telling you and everyone out there today, unless we deal with the constraints of compliance and regulation and the discounters and all the challenges that are out there today, if we don't change the way that we approach it, we're in the digital media age. We need to understand it. We need to be able to manage it. For the companies that work with us, we need to lead our teams. We need to be business people before we are pharmacists today, or equally to with the responsibilities, as you said, in the seriousness of the positions. And that's one of the things that you and I love about this industry. But the warning is out there. You heard it here, podcast 3, on whichever date you're listening to this to today, that if you don't change, then things are going to be forced to be changed for you. And I'm not the kind of person who's like that. And you're not the kind of person who's like that. So go out there, as Linda has suggested, and find the right teams, find the right people if you don't have the answers. And if you do have the answers, then go ahead and actually do the work.
I think that's a great note to end on.
Awesome. I love it. It's awesome to have you. Podcast 4, the S word. We're going to be talking about that soon. Sales in pharmacy. Look out for that one. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Okay.
Bye
Talk soon. Bye.